Hello everyone, welcome to Imprint IAS. Today I'm Varun Kolar and we're looking at the Indian Express and the Hindu Daily News Discovery for the day 30th of November 2008. Right, so what all we'll be covering today, we'll be looking at the Thoothukudi Incident and the UPSC case study on it. I'll be posting a link on the description, right, with the solution. Then we'll look at the hashtag MeToo movement and its impact, right? How the laws are going to be changed. There's an article on that on page 7 and page 18 of the Hindu, right? Then fuel prices and rupee going down. This is from page 1 and 13 of the Hindu. Then the ISRO launch, definitely that's very important for us in comparison, like GS paper 3, it would be very useful. Then back series, controversy. We'll look into that and also the Indian Express explain page briefly. Then editorial on India-Iran ties in the page 8. We look at the comments by Arvind Subramaniam on the demonetization and some miscellaneous articles on other topics, right? Okay, so let's start. And we'll start with GS book, that is Ethics and Governance. So the first is CBI has booked officials for Thoothukudi Incidents. So it says the CBI has registered a case against the police, revenue department officials, and others on charges of robbery, dacoity, falsification of evidence, disobeying law in connection with the Starlight protest and the subsequent firing that left 13 people killed in May. Right, and this was done on the complaint lodged by K.S. Arjunan, who was the district secretary of CPI-M in Thoothukudi. Right, and what has happened is that public servants, section 167, right, public servant framing an incorrect document with intent to cause injury, right, robbery, dacoity, criminal intimidation, charges of the Indian Penal Code have been put. And also section 166, that public servant disobeying law with intent to cause injury to any person, has also been, the case has been lodged against these officials. Those of you who don't know the story, I think this case study explains it really well. So it says a big corporate house, that is Vedanta, right, is engaged in manufacturing industrial chemicals on a large scale. So we have Starlight Copper. It proposes to set up an industrial unit, and many states reject this proposal due to the detrimental effect on environment. But one state government accedes to the request and permits the unit close to a city, brushing aside all opposition. And the unit was set up 10 years ago. It is in full swing, and there's pollution caused by the industrial effluents, and it was affecting the land, water, and crops in the area. It also gives serious health problems to the human beings and animals. And in case of the Starlight protest, there were Starlight symptoms, right? That is copper poisoning. This gave rise to serious agitation demanding the closure of the plant. And in a recent agitation, thousands of people took part, creating a law and order problem, necessitating stern police action. Following public outcry, the state government has ordered the closure of the factory. And obviously, the closure of the factory will resulted in the unemployment of not only those working in the in factory, but also who work in ancillary units. And it also affected those industries which depending on the chemicals manufactured by it. So the question is, as a senior officer entrusted with the responsibility of handling this issue, how are you going to address this, right? Okay, so the solution to this is another video, right? I'll put on the description link. You can go through this, but just to give a very brief idea, you're supposed to create, first you have to think about various stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? So obviously you, that is a senior officer, then the state government, right? The department who gave permission for such a factory to run, then the people who are working there in the factory as well in the ancillary units, and then the others, that is the people living in that area who were protesting, right? So all of them are part of this. So you basically have to think about the pros and cons for each one of them, right? And then obviously create options, right? In the video we have discussed normally 3 options. You can go through that, right? And then you basically say what are the positives and negatives of each option, and then choose one, right? That is the standard method of solving a case study. Have a look at that, right, in our description below. Okay, let's continue. We look at GS1 on history, society, and geography-based questions. So the first is obviously the hashtag MeToo. So it says that the group of ministers, right, constituted to examine sexual harassment in workplace may consider amending the law to ensure workplace safety according to government sources, right? And Who are the members? Obviously, the members are, Nitin Gadkari, Defense Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, and Women and Child Development Minister Menka Gandhi. These are the ones. The idea is that what would be the guiding principles? So the guiding principle of making this law would be the Vishakha guidelines, right? The previous law also, that is the Sexual Harassment of Women and Workplace Prevention Prohibition Redressal Act 2013, was also based on the Vishakha guidelines. So what are the Vishakha guidelines? Just to have an idea. So let's go to this. So the Vishakha guidelines laid down by the Supreme Court in 1987 lay the onus on the employer to prevent or deter acts of sexual harassment apart from providing resolution, settlement, or prosecution of acts of sexual harassment. And it says down, the act basically lays down the duties of an employer, ensuring safety during workplace, displaying penal consequences of sexual harassment, creating awareness, as well as facilitating an internal proof. Right? Justice G.S. Verma has said, he recommended an employment tribunal instead of an internal complaints committee. So this is something I think definitely needs to be done, because the internal committee normally never does a decent job. Okay, then there is a very interesting thing which has happened. The male bias and patriarchy is showing its colors here. So Chinmaya, she accused a poet lyricist of Viray Mathu of sexual harassment, right, while the wave of MeToo swept South India. But what has happened is that after MeToo, her work has dried up and she doesn't get any work. And obviously some other reasons always given, like she's not terminated for not paying some subscription fee or something or other, but everybody knows the real reason is obviously the sexual harassment issues. So that's the thing. So definitely, I think what should be done is the fact that sexual harassment in the film industry needs to be taken very differently, because workplace safety here is different. Because remember, what is the workplace in a film industry? It can be the director's residence, it can be a bathroom in a cafe, which can be a shooting spot. So the law should evolve, right, relating to sexual harassment, especially in the film industry where sexual harassment is rampant. And also the people in film industry themselves have to come into play, right? Because if you look at the Telugu film industry, they have a proper system, she's saying, especially after Srireddy's revolution, and they have formed a women collective. So obviously there has to be pressure from the NGOs and civil society. So that is the key, I would say. Because remember, laws can only go so far, and it is the society which implements the psychological barrier against committing any crimes. Let's look at GS3. We look at economics. We look at the question of, we'll continue an article on heat waves as well. But first, we look at the fuel prices. So one of the most beautiful things that have happened in the last few days is fuel prices have hit a new low on Thursday, with petrol falling to an 8-month low and a diesel, falling to a 4-month low. Right? This is wonderful. So now, in Delhi, it was 73 and 68. Right, and what it says is that the Indian basket of crude oil has been on a downward trajectory for the last 2 months, coming in right at $59.9, right, on Wednesday. But it was in October it was very, very high. So there was always a thing that there was a thought of a currency crisis and an oil crisis. What K. Ravichandran, who is the group head of the corporate sector ratings, he says fuel prices are a function of crude oil prices and rupee dollar parity, right? So, but obviously he says that you have to watch for two things. That is the G20 summit and the meeting of the OPEC. He says that OPEC, if OPEC resorts to production cuts, oil prices can increase to $65 to $70. Okay. He says that the reason of this low production has been because of record production level in the US. And even Russia has been ramping up, right, the production of oil. And therefore, this is happening, right? And he says that rupee has also stabilized to about 70 rupees a dollar. So given the two factors, he doesn't affect any changes in retail pricing, right? So he expects the petrol price to be around 70 rupees the way it is right now. So this should be maintained, and this should, let's taper it down here. So very, very good news. All of us can get cheap petrol, at least cheaper than what we thought we would get. Okay. Again, the same similar article. This talks about rupee, being at 69.85, and it appreciates to a 3-month high, and Sensex is also up by 450 points. So again, right? So why is this happening? The rupee remains firm on the account of sharp decline in crude oil prices in the international market, and this is what Rishabh Maru, right, who's a research analyst, talks about. He says the near-term range would be 69.50 to 71, right? But now I think he says there will be other issues on which rupee can be impacted. So he says now the focus will be on India's GDP data, the RBI monetary policy meeting, which is going to happen in December, the OPEC meeting, and the outcome of state elections. These data in event will provide further discussion to the rupee. So he says that obviously, yes, oil prices are impacting rupees, right? And lower crude, prices would, obviously help contain the current account deficit as well inflation, right? Remember, we import as much as 80% of our crude oil requirements. We import more than $100 billion of crude every year. There would be other factors, that is our GDP data, which has will be coming, right, in the next few months, right? And then the RBI monetary policy report and so on. So those things are equally important. Okay, then just to change from the economy portion, let's look into sharp eye into orbit, right? The PSLV C-43, it injected the hyperspectral imaging satellite. We talked about this yesterday as well. So just to revise, what would the HysIS be used for? It will be used for agriculture, forestry, soil survey, geology, coastal zones studies, inland water studies, environmental monitoring, and pollution detection. So this is extremely, extremely important, right? And soon, obviously, we'll have GSAT 11 being launched and GSAT 7A on 5th and 11th, 14th of December. And then we have Chandrayaan 2. That's going to be the biggest thing, I think, for the next year, right? Finally, we're going to land a rover on Mars. So that's going to be something. Right. Okay. So I think that's enough with it. In case you're looking for some more extra details, go through our video of yesterday. I think we have discussed it in detail. Okay. Then farmers in Delhi, policy change. So now what is happening is that there's rural distress all over India. So this rural distress, right, needs to be solved because, see, remember, what this rural distress is actually leading to reservation protests. So you can see actually reservation protests by the Pattidars, by Marathas, by Jats, by Kappus, right? So whether it's Maharashtra, whether it's Andhra, whether it's Haryana, so all this rural distress is leading to reservation protests because obviously these people now have to shift from being a farmer to doing something else, right? And obviously it's not easy for them. Therefore, they basically ask for some kind of reservation because obviously educationally they might not be that progressive, right? So this rural distress is one of the biggest challenges we face. Why? Because obviously nearly 59% of our population basically, works in agriculture, right? And this is something that we really need to focus on. So what are the two things they're looking for? They're looking for farm waiver. That's one, and implementation of MSP. The two things they're looking for, right? So I think let's see if the government agrees to it. Most probably they will because it's an election year, but let's see what happens. Okay. Then Arun Jaitley, in a very interesting mood, he says Indian healthcare and agriculture sector needs a federal institution similar to the GST Council to coordinate the state and central schemes, right? And obviously they're saying that there are two other institutions which require. Why the healthcare he has chosen? Because obviously healthcare, right, has a lot of the problem becomes is that both the center and the state spend resources, ran schemes, established hospitals and other institutions. He's saying that we are doing Ayushman Bharat, they are also doing parallel schemes, and all these need to be merged so that the benefit of merged resources starts falling to the benefit of the patient population of the country, right? And obviously, he says the implementation of these policies should be the responsibility of the state, and the center should be responsible for the coordination, right? Okay. The other thing is saying obviously agriculture, because obviously agriculture distress is also there, and there's a lot of schemes which in agriculture also which are there in center as well as state. So he says GST Council, which comprises the union state finance ministers, right, after a successful experiment in practical federalism, should now be expanded to other bodies. So maybe the state agriculture minister or the state health minister should also form a council, so or the healthcare council or the agriculture council. So let's see what they will come, right? So what kind of question can come? The GST Council offers a modern technology of cooperative federalism, which can be applied to many other policy reforms. Comment on the issues the Economic Survey 2017-18 suggesting. So what I'm saying is that actually what Jaitley is saying is not what he thinks, it's actually what the Economic Survey is thinking, right? So what other, so already Jaitley has given you a hint, right? That, okay, healthcare, agriculture, so you can actually think of other topics in which center-state relations can be done. So state subjects, which are actually important nationally. So those are the ones which need to be taken up here, right? Okay. Now we have the most interesting cartoon and the speculative, and this is Arun Jaitley. He says, see, as per as revised GDP figures, you did not have a challenge even during the UPA government either. Now, when you think about this, there are two issues with the numbers that Mr. Jaitley has been giving. But if you think about writing in the exam, I would say don't criticize the government, especially till the time till the new government doesn't come. But if you think about it, the basic problem with what Jaitley is saying, the fact is, since 2014 to 18, the exports are stagnant or even have gone down, right? Then the credit uptake or the private sector investment is done. And this is in the years 2014 to 18. And then we had demo and GST shocks, right? Now, with all this, whatever numbers they're throwing does seem like garbage, okay? Right, to be honest. One of the problems of Mr. Jaitley's numbers right here, the 7.4, the 8.2, the 7.1, and 6.7, is the basic problem with these numbers is that it is assuming that the unorganized sector is growing at the same level as the organized sector, right? And that is not happening anymore. Okay, so actually, if you think about that, you can easily subtract. So I would say, if I'm being realistic, this is -2 in all of these, at least. Okay. Right, because if you have 8.2 in a year, or 7.1 in a year when there's demo and GST, I don't know what's going to happen. Okay, so now just to let's be a little less pessimistic, I would say, and let's try to take it with a pinch of salt, whatever they've done. So GDP back series data has been given, right? Now the first question is, what is the back series? So the idea is that the CSO moved to a new base here in 2011-12 for the national accounts in January 2015. Remember, it was done by the Modi government, right? So that's why we always say that our data is now become as shady as China's. Now CSO was faced with issues evaluating the GDP. Why? Because they were actually taking the MCA 21 database. Now, obviously, what is MCA 21? It's an e-governance initiative of the Ministry of Companies Affairs, and it was launched, right? And in 2006, right, to allow firms to electronically file their financial results, right? So when we are shifting from 2004-5 to 2011-12, right, CSO did with the GDP at factor cost and adopted the international practice of valuing industry-wise estimates as gross value added as basic prices. So they basically changed our methodology, and in addition got the volume index of the IIP and established a base data set of the annual survey of industries, right? So finally, after a long time, we were just asking for the back series because when the Modi government basically gave their new GDP methodology and the growth rate, we had no way to compare it with the findings of what was 2004, 13, 14, or 12, 13. What was the growth rates then, right? So now the controversy has been that there was a committee estimate. So very interestingly, something very interesting happened. 3 months ago, the Committee on Real Sector Statistics submitted a report on National Statistical Commission offering an alternative. It says that the economy grew at a faster pace in UPA from 2004-5 to right 2013-14, and it's basically increased. It basically showed that growth was actually a little more than what it was, and it even basically showed that in 2 years the UPA grew at 10.78. Right? I think, why do we think about UPA or India? It's India, which is great. But under the new series, it says that yes, it was not the case, and there was a big problem in the 2008, 9, and 9, 10, and 10, 11. Why? Because previously, when you used to think about this, we used to think that that there was a decoupling, right? That India is not related to the rest of the world. Right now, we are thinking, no, that's not the case, that India was indeed coupled, which sounds very difficult to believe, but okay, we'll believe it. But this government tends to believe anything, right? Like demonetization didn't have any impact also. But anyhow, so this is a big problem. The other issue is obviously with this new back series is that this has been released by Niti Aayog. Now, once a political institutions comes into something like this, right? So the optics basically are bad of this, right? So obviously, this is the release of that series by Niti Aayog goes against convention is bad in optics. Basically, it tells you something that it is just for 2019 elections that this government is again fudging data, right? And that is what the opposition is going to say. And that is, also a very sensible economist is also going to say. Now, somehow I have to stop believing whatever data is given by this government, right? Just look at what they did with the agriculture ministry, right? One day before, the agriculture ministry said that yes, there is no growth rate. The growth, obviously because of demonetization, it was bad in sector. The next day saying no, nothing like that. People were happy, right? So the problem is that we tend to have a government of alternate news now, right? This is what they basically believe in, managing bad stories rather than anything else, right? And that is the basic plan of this government till now. But for the time being, if we tend to believe that okay, whatever they're saying is true, then it basically says that India was not actually decoupled with the world economy in 2008, 9, 10, right? And we actually suffered a lot more than we thought we did. Okay, right? I don't think so that actually was the case, but okay, right? That is the problem, right? But why? So let's, for the time being, say that obviously, they are actually, very sensible people. We have statisticians who actually have made this. So obviously, this has been generated by as a very thoroughly professional, this article says, thoroughly professional organization. The CSO have been scrutinized by method. But anyhow, I think this article can be safely ignored except for an interview, because the only thing which is important for us in this article is that you should know what is MCA 21, which ministry basically runs it. Then you should know that we now have GV at basic prices and not GDP at factor cost. You should basically understand that is the case. Right? Anything else was more political than anything, right? And maybe then obviously you need to look at the new data, right, which can be quoted by you. Okay, then we have something very interesting. This is Arvind Subramaniam. He's written a book, right? If you get a chance to read it, it will be released in a couple of days, I think. So it says, book as of counsel, the challenges of the Modi Jaitley economy. And he says that in this, demonetization was a massive draconian monetary shock. In one swoop, 86% of the currency in circulation was withdrawn, right? And real growth was clearly affected by demonetization, right? But basically, he says that there is something odd. Okay, the question is, why was it so popular politically if it imposed such economic cost? And why did 86% of the cash did not have a greater impact on the economic growth, right? And he says, what he says, let's look at it. He says, I offer the controversial hypothesis that imposing large costs on a wide cross-section of people unexpectedly and unintentionally, though it might have been, could have actually been indispensable to achieve political success. That is what he says. What does he mean by that? I think maybe he's referring to the victory in UP. Right. And he says one answer to the demonetization problem has been that the poor were willing to overlook their hardship, knowing that the rich and their ill-gotten begotten wealth were experiencing even greater hardship. So they basically felt that, poor were willing to go. But Arvind Subramanian says it's not convincing. There has to be something else. Right. Now, the problem is that, he says that the collateral damage in the whole demonetization action, was avoidable. The anti-elite populism could have taken the form of such punitive actions, such as taxation, appropriation, raids, etc. Right? But I'll be very, very honest. Demonetization happened for two things. One was the problems of the NPA in banks, because all the banks would have failed by now if demonetization didn't happen and all the money didn't go back in the banks. Right? The other is obviously the UP elections. Right, this government thinks politically too much and would do anything to win an election. Right. Anyhow, but that's my view on this. I think it will become more clearer once this government goes out of power. If it does, that is. If it doesn't, then we'll never know the truth, I would say. Okay. Then we've already discussed the heat wave, right? The definition of heat wave yesterday. So this is the editorial on the same topic. It says the staggering loss of estimated 153 billion hours of labor during 2017 due to high rising temperature around the globe is a reminder that governments are not doing enough to curb greenhouse gas emissions. And Lancelot Countdown on Health and Climate reported that India was particularly affected by the rising frequency and lost around 75 billion hours of work, and obviously a significant part of it in the agriculture sector. And obviously this can be seen as the cause of rural distress. Remember, there is a chapter on the economic survey on climate change and agriculture, so you can actually go through that also, right? The rest of it, we have really talked about it, right? But let's still go through the whole article. Okay, so it says this has worrying implication for rural employment as and the well-being of a large section of population that depends on farming. At stake for all countries in the developing world is the health of millions, many of them already vulnerable to extreme weather events. Right, coming on the eve of the UN climate conference in Katowice in Poland, right? The report of the Lancet panel for 2018 brings clarity, placing connected issues in perspective for government action. Because when you start giving data like this, that you've lost so much hour because of labor productivity, and this is because of greenhouse gas emissions, now governments will take into account that this is actually having an economic cost. So they might do something about it. Okay, so let's continue. It is vital that India gets more ambitious about cutting back on carbon emissions, even as it presses for fulfillment of the climate finance obligation of developed countries under the Paris Agreement of the UN framework on climate change. A further reduction of coal, right, through sustained support of renewable energy, particularly solar photovoltaics, must form the cornerstone of national policy, right? And this must be matched by the induction of more electric vehicles. We still are not able to import Tesla. If you try to import a Tesla electric car from, let's say, US, you are charged 200% duty. So this is a huge problem, right? There has to be some kind of a benefit tax refund, which is the same case in US. Right, such a policy would yield the parallel benefits of improving air quality, ambient air pollution, led to premature death of an estimated 500,000 of people in 2015. Right. So this is what he's saying is that this pollution is also causing a lot of, if you think about Delhi, right, there's a lot of air pollution. Now, the idea is that there's a growing consensus that, climate change is affecting extreme weather events. And India's approach to adaptation should therefore be prepared for catastrophes with well-defined plan to provide relief and rehabilitation. Remember, if there's a catastrophe in India, it's going to be much more difficult to provide rehabilitation because the land cost is too high. We have a high land-man ratio. Okay, right? It says if the center and the state governments can arrive at consensus on the strong climate linked to the excessive rain in Kerala and Cyclone Gaja in Tamil Nadu, right? For instance, a case should be made for climate funds under the Paris Agreement. And such agreement should be supported by prospective plans that identifies vulnerable regions and communities and incorporates transparent systems for funds utilization. The importance of funds for adaptation is underscored by landslide finding that 99% of losses from climate-related events in low-income countries were not insured. So this is even more important, right? Because we don't have any insurance. If there is loss, it is lost forever, right? People are going to not get any kind of insurance. So and also from a healthcare perspective, obviously increase in rising temperature will increase dengue, malaria, and other virus diseases, and this will also impact. So this what it ends with is that we now need to think about the impact of climate change on healthcare, not just agriculture. So on ending note, please look at the chapter on climate change and agriculture, right, from the economic survey, right, and right, this is in the economic survey. Okay, let's look at GS2, and this is an article by Anita Inder Singh, and she's a founding professor of Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution. It says that India must remain hyper alert on US waiver on, Iranian imports and Chapel, right? It says that, remember that the waiver, which gives breathing space of sorts, right, and which will help maintain India-US ties on an even keel, right, has not given any special treatment to India. China also has been given, right, and also, right, remember China is, India's main Asian competitor and is perceived by US as its security threat. So if he's actually, this what has happened is they have given this waiver to a lot of other countries as well. There are 7 other countries, right? So therefore, something needs to be looked into this, right? And obviously, it does say that obviously Washington and New Delhi will cooperate on India oil and gas needs. And what is Donald Trump wanting from India is the fact that he thinks that Trump admission, wants that India imports more and more oil from US. So in 2017, we imported 8 million barrels of crude oil, and in July we have now imported more than 15 million barrels of crude oil. So obviously, USA is now actually becoming the leading producer, because remember, it is the leading world's producer of oil and gas. So obviously, it actually sees India as a market, and Iran is a competitor now. Okay, it's very interesting. Okay, the other thing, this article talks about the Chabad port, and it talks about something very interesting. It says that India's cooperation with Iran must be seen in the broader context of its rivalries with Pakistan and China. Right. Remember, Iran and India say regional interest. They would basically build a strategic partnership focused on Pakistan, Afghanistan, Central Asia, West Asia. And remember, they're also signatories to the International North-South Transport Corridor Agreement. And they basically India wants to use Iran as a trade route to Russia and Northern Europe. Okay. Now, we are trying to do this. Why is the US not really, exempting us that we can progress exempt, from this, and we can make this port? The reason is the fact that if we do not do it, China has a stake, right? And if India doesn't make this port, what will happen is China will replace it, and it gain further foothold. Therefore, obviously, for the US, it's better that India does it rather than China. Okay. Then, obviously, we have to understand that India obviously is opposed to Iran's efforts to acquire nuclear capability, right? Because obviously a nuclear Iran would disrupt the balance of power across West Asia with serious consequences for India's economic and strategic interests. But obviously, a stronger relationship with Iran would increase India's influence in West Asia and Central Asia, and it would help counter China, especially in Afghanistan and in Central Asia, right? So this could help, counter China, and a friendly US could then approach Iran on, nuclear issues. I think she's trying for too much, right? And underestimating the animosity between US and Iran. But okay, that's what this article says. Okay, let's move ahead. Okay, then we have a case for Progressive International. Gaurav Bhatia is a Delhi-based lawyer, and he talks about a few things in this article. He says that we are now, India is facing legal claims from its international investors in as much as 23 arbitration cases. And these are, before various tribunals, and these are worth billions of dollars, and basically because of the bilateral investment treaties between India and other states, And the striking feature is that they allow these bilateral trade agreements, allow international investors, that is MNCs, to initiate a dispute directly in the international tribunal, bypassing the state's own constitution and its courts. And the disputes revolve around measures that were triggered by public health emergencies, economic crises, and other matters of public welfare, which would therefore be permissible under the constitution, but which the corporation believes has negative impact on its financial interests. So, this is something that needs to be done. That the MNCs, are now actually using these international treaties and using these tribunals, and they're actually completely unaccountable to the rest of the world. And for this, he has given some very, very interesting examples. He says that there's a contemporary truth about the globalized world, right? There were issues that were earlier resolved with the sovereign state in accordance with through its constitution system, now acquire a transnational character, right? There are contemporary examples. Because of its attempts to make essential medicines affordable through amendments to its Patent Act, India has become under pressure from the US and the European Union at the behest of the pharma lobby, while finding support and emulation in countries such as South Africa and Thailand. And indeed, in 2011, it says that the EU seized shipments of life-saving Indian drugs that were being exported to Africa and Latin America on the basis that it could apply, more restrictive, patents and custom laws to goods in transit through its territory. Right. So obviously, what's happening is now, even nations' sovereignty is being challenged by these MNCs. And remember, this same thing used to be happening when East India Company used to do it in the Indian history, right? And Aurangzeb actually, attacked them, and the East India Company had to say sorry and all that after they lost the war, right? Okay. So, what were the other examples they've given? The other example he's given is Uber. He says, in October, Uber and Ola drivers in Mumbai called for an indefinite strike over low pay after a similar strike in Delhi. Now, UK, EU, and various states, there has been protracted bitter litigation over legal obligation that Uber, owes its drivers. Right. So there are obviously a lot of issues with the Uber's transnational character, right? And like in the case of investment treaties, it is often difficult for one country to tackle. So therefore, it needs that we need some kind of a transnational group of countries in which, let's say, Uber is in so many countries, XYZ countries. So all these countries actually need to make a group to tackle these, MNCs. Okay. And now what he has done is he has actually given an example. He says it is helpful to look elsewhere how other people have attempted to engage with such issues. The example he's given is Democracy in Europe Movement 25, DIEM 25, which has arose in Greek after the debt crisis and the structural adjustment program that was imposed by the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and International Monetary Fund. And this was, led to rapid, mass employment, widespread privatization, and direct convention of the public will of the people through elections and referendum. And what has happened is that this a different type of colonization has started. Okay, of the people. The will of the people is subjugated to the whims and fancies of these IMF and central bank. Okay, so that's one problem, right? The other issue, obviously, he also talks about is the aspect of technology in our daily lives, right? There's a long-running debate, conflict of Aadhaar. There is a draft DNA profiling bill. The relationship between technology and human freedom would be vital, and therefore DIM obviously has drawn a specific link between technology and democracy. And obviously, we should understand that these contemporary issues such as platform monopolies like Uber, ubiquity of AI in public decision making, such as in welfare, is something that we have to be very careful with. In September, we have Bernie Sanders. He called for a progressive international. He has a solution. He says an international progressive movement that mobilizes a vision of shared prosperity, security, dignity for all people, and addresses a massive inequality that exists not only in wealth but in political power. And he basically, Mr. Vroukas, who was, the founding of DIM 25 and also Greek finance minister, he says that this can be the new international deal, right? And this can serve as a potential blueprint and a model for, what how we would deal with these transnational challenges, right, we face today. Now, this, Bartley, why did we discuss? This is extremely, extremely important for your essay. And obviously ethics, right? There's a topic in, international affairs, right? In ethics. So that is also here that in this, article basically looks into. Okay, then very quickly we look into the Ukraine crisis. So just let's, the one thing you should have is a timeline, because you can fill in the blanks, but if you don't know the facts, right, no structure, no framework can actually help you. So you should basically know the Ukraine map. So this is the Black Sea, right? It's mentioned here as well. This is the Sea of Azov. This is Crimea, and this was occupied by, the Russians, right? Okay, so let's very quickly go through this. So we have November 21st, 2013, and we have Ukraine President Viktor Yanukovych, and he suspends a trade deal with Europe, and it led to a lot of protests, right? Especially during this portion. This is the eastern portion, right, which is a lot more pro-Europe than the others. And gunfight basically was there, and Yanukovych actually had to flee, right, on February 22. And Russia approved sending its military force to Crimea. Why? Because Crimea is extremely important to Russia, because it's the only base they have, right? And if Russian ties go, south, what will happen is that Russia will not have any access to any sea, and it's a primary fleet. So Kyiv begins military action against pro-Russian rebels in eastern Ukraine. So this is the side where, all these areas, are pro-Russian, right? And Petro Poroshenko, he won the Ukraine presidency, and he signs the EU association agreement. And then in July 17, 298 people were killed when MH17 plane was shot down by a rebel held territory by a missile, right? So then in 2015, the limbo was stopped, and France and Germany hammered out a truce deal with Ukraine. And what happened was in June 22nd, 15, European Union extends sanctions against Russia because of the country's action in Ukraine and Crimea, right? Russia really doesn't care two hoots about it. And Pentagon and State Department proposed arming Ukraine in some time, and in August 23rd, Ukraine and Russia agreed to a ceasefire. And then Kyiv basically passed now the basic crisis has been because of this, right, in the last. So Kyiv basically passed a law this year in January that we will reintegrate the areas which are under pro-Russian rebels, and obviously under martial law. So EU also extends its sanctions on Russia, and investigators actually said the MH17 was shot down by a Russian missile, right? Then what happened was that on November 25th, the crisis started because, again, because of the Ukrainian ships under Kerch Strait in the Sea of Azov. Basically, they said that they have entered the Russian waters. And typically what happened was the Parliament has approved martial law, right? And this has been a big thing, right? Because remember, majority of Ukraine's exports will pass through the sea, and this is a big issue. And this has been going on since 2013 onwards. And if you even look at world history, there's a Crimean War, right? In case you want to go through that, please go through Wikipedia, and you can actually read about the Crimean War in the 1800s. Great. Okay. For the PDF, please join our Telegram group. Right. Thank you so much. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Right. If you have any questions, if you feel that we need to make some kind of specific videos on some specific topic, please let us know. Right. Thank you so much.